Hi guys, welcome to this video. So I'm going to talk about very important topic called Angular Universal, and it provides us server-side rendering components. It means that the server-side rendering components have a good speed, initial page loading speed, and it helps us in improving the SEO of the application, and it also improves the performance of the web application when we open the web app on the low powered devices or the slow internet connection. Okay, so I will be showing you how we can set up Angular Universal in latest Angular version, which is 16, and how we can create components and routes and set up express server so we can render few components or few routes from the server side and some components and some routes from the client side. And I'll let you know that how we can debug and test that what are the server side components and what are the client side components. Okay, and then I'll be talking about how we can pre-render few components initially for improving the first page load speed of our web application. So I've already installed Angular 16 project and opened up in VS Code, and the way I have installed it is using the latest stable version of Node, and this is the latest version. And from this I've installed the latest version of npm, which is automatically installed, and from this latest version of npm I actually installed the latest version of Angular CLI. Okay, and once the Angular CLI is installed, if I show you my current version of Angular CLI, it shows that Angular CLI version is 16.1. And from this, if I run the ng new and the name of project, it will create the latest Angular project of version 16. Okay, so let me get inside the latest version, and these are all the files which are by default created. And if I go to the package.json, you can see that this is the Angular version 16 already installed in this project. Okay, so first of all, what I'll be doing is I'll be creating a two routes in my app. So I'm assuming that you're already aware of how the Angular project is structured. So this is the main component app.ts file, and I'll be opening up this main HTML file, and I'll be removing everything from this file except the last line, which is actually loading the routes which I'll be creating just now. Okay, so I will be just close it, and in this project in app directory I'll be creating components. So I'll be writing nggc and I'll be creating a components folder, and the first component that I'll be creating is posts. So this has been created, you can see it has created a folder and then the posts. Okay, so let me create another component. So I will be naming this component home. So I will just up arrow and then the home. So this new component have been added, and let me create a new service as well. So nggs, and I'll be creating it inside the services folder, and then inside it I will be naming it API handler. Okay, so this new service will be created inside the services folder. All right, and these are the two components, and its references should be added in our app.module.ts file. Okay, so first of all, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to call a public API from the JSON placeholder, and I'll be server side rendered that component which is going to call that API and load the data on the page. Okay, so I'm going to open up this posts, and first of all this posts.component.ts file, and in this file I'm going to import few stuff. So first of all, I'm going to import HTTP client, and it is from Angular common HTTP. Okay, and then I need to import the service which I need to create yet. So let's first go ahead to the service file, and I'm going to create a service inside it. So first of all, in the service, again I need to use this HTTP client module. So I'll be copy pasting over here, and inside it, first of all, I need to have the URL. So this one is the private API URL equals to, and then I'll just be copy pasting the URL after this, which is from the JSON placeholder, and it returns 100 posts, which is the public API. Okay, and then I'll be creating a constructor And inside this constructor, I'll be creating this HTTP client object, this which I have imported above. All right. So after this, let's add these curly braces, and I've already added this constructor actually. So now let's add a fetch data from API, and then I'm going to return this .http.get this .api.url. Okay, so I think this is pretty much it we need to do in this file. So I will be just closing this file like this, and now let's import this in our component here. So I'm going to write import API handler service from this route. Okay, so this has been imported. Now let's come inside this posts component, and here I'll be writing the API data any, and then let's have a constructor private post service which is already created, and then I need to create ng on init. So it has been added. So by default, I'm using the Tab 9 Pro AI Assistant. So that's why it is suggesting me some content which might not be right sometime. So it has actually called that API. So this is not the function which I created in this service. Let's go ahead and copy a function. So this is the function I've called, and then it is subscribing, and then it is placing the data over here, and it is actually giving me this name of the service which I need to update. All right, so I think this is pretty much it I need to do in this component. Now we need to show these posts in our HTML file for the posts. Okay, so in this file, first of all, I'll start off with the div, and inside this div I need to actually iterate through. Let's first add this heading, so API data, and after this heading I'll be writing UL. So let's add ng for on it. So ng for equals to let post of API data. Okay, and inside it I'll be writing h3 and then post dot title, and after this I'll be writing p, and I'll only be printing post dot body. Okay, so this has been printed using a loop. So after this div, actually let's add an li tag under this ul tag. Okay, so let's save it, and after this div we can actually add an if condition like ng if, and we can add not API data. Okay, and then loading. So we can add this condition over here as well. So I'll be writing ng if equals to API data. All right, so now we need to load this in our main component, which is the app component. So I will first go ahead. So I won't be adding anything in the home component. It's just by default showing the home works, and let me change its tag a bit so we can see it properly on the browser. So I'll just be closing it. So every content that I have created in this posts component, I will try to load it from the server, means the server side rendered component. Everything that is in the home component, I will manage it from the client side component. By default, this Angular Universal actually loads all the components, all the routes of Angular from the server side, but we can actually configure it through the server.tsx file, which is mainly the express.js file. Okay, so then I need to go to the app.module, and inside it I need to actually add some providers to it. So first of all, I need to add this import for the HTTP because we are using the HTTP client module. So HTTP client module, which has been imported, and I think this is pretty much it that we have to do. So I'll just be copy pasting the line which I have already added in other components, and then we need to import the service which we have created. So let me import that service as well, so which is in the services folder, and then we need to add this service in our API handler service provider array. So this is the providers array, we need to add this. All right, now another thing we need to do is to add the routes in our routing file, and in this file we need to add different objects. So I'll be pasting few stuff inside it, which would be the 3 objects. So this is the objects, and we need to import home component and the post component at the top. Okay, so this is the home route, this is the post route, and whenever we will try to trigger the default route, it will be redirected to our home route. Okay, and that's it. Now let's try to run our project. It is not currently Angular universal project, or I have not actually configured the service workers for server-side rendering at the moment. In order to run the project, I can simply run npm run start. As you can see from the package.json file, this is the start command, and it will run the ng-serve. Okay, so once it's building the project, first time it takes time because it needs to create this folder for the building this project. So I'll be going to my browser and I'll be running this localhost colon 4200 project. Okay, so let's try to reload, and this is the home route by default's working because we have set up the redirect. And let's try to trigger the posts, and this is the API data that is I have called, and it is showing the title and the body from that API. All right, so and one thing I want to show over here, that I have not already integrated Angular universal or server side rendered in this project. So in order to test whether this particular route or a component is server side rendered or not, so what I need to do is I will be right clicking and go to the page source, and here you will see that this page is empty, means that it is not showing any data which is visible over here. It means that this data was rendered from the client side, and the page source view source actually shows the data which is rendered from the server side. So currently we don't have any server side data. That's why this app root tag, let me zoom in, this app root tag is empty. So we need to fill up our data which is showing over here inside this app root element, so that this data is visible to our search engines, so they can rank our article or the page to their search engines from the content that is given on this page. Okay, we need to decide which page we want to render from the server side and which page we want to render from the client side. And keep watching this video. I will let you know at the end that how do we decide that which route or the component we need to render from the server side, and rest leave other components to the client side rendering. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna go to this project again, and now I need to configure my this Angular 16 project with Angular universal. So if I go to the documentation, I can have this command which I can copy and I can paste over here, and it will ask me some question. So it needs to change few configuration files. So it is asking me whether I want to really proceed with it. So it is downloading few packages, and it will also install few scripts over here, because it's up to us whether we want to run our project through server side or Angular universe. You can see that it has already added over here. This is the dev colon server which we will be using to run our project during the development phase, and this is for the building the project, and this is for pre-rendering our static pages initially in our dist folder, which is created at the build time. Okay, which I'll explain you more at the end of this video. Okay, so our Angular universal project is configured in version 16. So first of all, it has created this tsconfig.server.js file, which is by default, we don't need to touch it. And then it has actually created this main.server.ts. We also don't need to touch it, and it is the by default configure, and this app.server.module.ts. And then it has actually added this component which is server.ts, and this is the main file which we will be modifying to configure over some component, mainly the post route from the server side and the home route from the client side. Currently, if I run my Angular Universal project, you will see that all the routes of our Angular project are server side rendered, which is not a good practice. We need to customize it and configure it like how we want to proceed with the server side rendering and the client side rendering in our project. Okay, so let's first run our project, and in order to run our project with Angular Universal, if I go to package.json, I need to run this dev colon ssr command. So I can run npm run dev colon ssr. So I'll hit enter, and it is showing some kind of it's saying that don't use this command for the production. Obviously we already know that this is only for development. So it is currently generating some bundles for the server components, and if I go up, you will see that it will show a dist folder over here, and that dist folder is going to contain all the files of build that is being generated over here. Okay, so if I go my browser, and I'll just close it, and here if I refresh, it is not actually loaded. So it is building our project currently, and you can see this is the dist folder is created, and this index.html file is the entry point for all the components that is created through Angular Universal. Okay, so whenever we create our project through Angular Universal, we will need to deploy this dist folder to our production server. Okay, so now this is running, and if I refresh my page, you can see that it is showing the same data. But what is the difference? Earlier you saw that the app root element was empty. Now if I go to the page source, you will see that this app root is filled up with all the data that is visible to our page, and this is awesome. It means that our page for the post is the server side rendered, and this data is going to be visible to the search engines for ranking our page, and this is good for our SEO, the search engine optimization, and it is also going to enable the first page loading speed of our page, which is server side rendered, if we pre-rendered this page and stored the pre-rendered content in our static folder, which I will let you know at the end of this video how we can do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to run our home route as well. So if I go to home route, right click and inspect, not inspect, I need to go to the page view source, and here you can see that this is only one string, and it is also visible over here, home works. Okay, this means that this page is also server side rendered. Okay, even though it's not going to benefit the SEO for our page, but all of our pages, all of our routes in our Angular projects are currently the server side rendered. So now let's go ahead and see what we have in the server.ts file. And I won't be explaining much because this is some kind of backend code, like the express.js is the framework of Node. If you want to learn Express, you can check out my complete crash course on Node Express MongoDB, but let me go through it quickly. And this is actually creating a server and running the server over here. You can see on the port which is already added on in our Angular project. Okay, and what's happening here, this particular line is the one which we need to see. So server.get static means that the all regular routes use the universal engine. So we need to modify the logic inside this route, which is handling all the routes of our Angular project, so that we can detect that which route needs to be server side rendered and which route needs to be client side rendered. Okay, so I'll be server side rendering this post page because this data is coming from API, and I feel like that this data is good for SEO form of my page. So that's why I want to render it from the server side. Other components like home component is the constant one string, which I think is not beneficial for SEO. So I'll just be ignoring it from the server side. So what I need to do is I'll come inside this particular static route, and inside it I will be modifying few stuff. So first of all, I need to add an if condition. So first of all, let's create an array at the top. So I'm going to write ssr routes. Okay, and I'm going to add the posts only inside it. So I'll be going through this particular array, and if any string exists in this array which is also existing in the URL of our page, that means that we need to render it from the server. And this particular line, response.render, is actually handling the server side rendering. So let me write something inside this if. So ssr routes dot sum route, and then arrow function, and then I can get the current URL of the page from the request.url.starts with, and then route. Okay, so what it's gonna do is it's going to detect that what that array which I've created above containing. So it only contains posts. It means that this server side rendering line will be rendered only for the posts route. Okay, and after this, let me save this file, and after this I can add an else statement, and inside the else I need to keep it the client side component. So I can send file, and then I can write join dist folder, and then index.html, and dist folder you can see that is already added over here for the views, and this is the dist folder which I'm referring currently. Okay, so this dist folder is actually referring to the dist folder which is created over here. So on the left side you can see that it is actually, if we go to this browser, and this is the index file, and it is the entry point of all the client components which we create through Angular Universal. Okay, so now all the post route will be server side rendered, and other remaining routes, no matter if there are hundreds of routes, will be a client side rendering component. So I'll just save this file, and I will stop the server and rerun the server now. Okay, now let's see what happens if we go to the browser and test our application. And I've already shown you how we can test our application. Because we have made some changes in the server.ts file, it is taking some time to generating the project. Let's go to our browser, let's close it. Now let's refresh, and this is the home works. You remember that this is on the route slash home, and it should not be a server side rendered component. I'll go to the page source, and you can see that the app root element is empty. It means it is a client component. So we have successfully configured it. All right. And now let's go to the posts, hit enter, and I will right click, go to the page source, and yes, and it is a server side component. So only this route is going to be server side, all other routes will be the client side component. All right, so this is how we can configure our Angular project for server side components and the client side components, depending upon what kind of data you have on the page. Remember that we only do the server side rendering for the pages which have the some kind of data from the API which you think is beneficial for the SEO. Okay, and one thing you need to remember, that we will never ever do the server side rendering for the pages which are private, means that which require authentication from the user. Obviously when user will be logging in on your website and going to some kind of logged in dashboard page, that dashboard page is not going to be shown up on the Google or any search engine, because that route is private. So we will always be doing client side rendering for all the private routes in our project. We will only do the server side rendering components for the landing public pages which have some beneficial data which needs to be loaded fast on the web page, which needs to have some kind of search engine optimization to be shown on the Google search. And this is how we decide how we needs to work with the server side components and the client side components. So there is another concept that I would like to explain here. Let's go to the post dot component, and inside ng on init, I'm going to add a console log, and I will be adding the posts. And let's go to the home route, and inside this component let's add the constructor, and inside this constructor let's add this home component home. Okay, so let's save both of these components and let's run our project npm run dev colon ssr. So our project is running now. Let's go to our browser and let's refresh to our route, which is the posts route. And if I inspect, let's go to the console window and let's come here. Let's refresh again. And if I check here, you will see that this is the server which is running. This is the terminal of Angular project, and it is printing posts, which is the on the server side, because this is the server component. And on the browser it is also printing. So you might be thinking that if it is a server component, then why it is printing on the server as well as on the client side. So actually Angular Universal first loads the page from the server side, then it loads the page from the client side, because on the server side component which we have pre-rendered from the server, we might need to handle few kinds of events, like the browser events, like the local storage, session storage, button click events, filling the form and sending the form, and these are all the client side steps. Okay, so Angular Universal speed up the page loading and the SEO from the server side, and when it loads on the client on the browser, it becomes a client side component, because we want to do some kind of event handling, which I have already explained you. So this is automatically optimizing it from the server to the client component, so that we can use it to speed up the page, as well as handling the user browser APIs and handling some events, filling forms and stuff like that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's see our home route. If I hit the home route, you will see that this home is printed over here, which is the client side, because this browser is a client side. But if I go to my terminal on the Angular project, you can see that it is not printing the home over here, because our home route is only the client side component and it is not the server side component. So I hope that you have got the idea of the server side component and the client side components. So this is it. I hope that you have understood the concepts of Angular Universal, how we can set up Angular 16 project, how we can set up Angular server side components, client side components, how we can set up Express server and modify the server.ts file for different conditions, client based component and the server client components. So if you like my videos, don't forget to subscribe my channel, hit the like button and comment below if you have any question, and see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.